From the moment we are born, we begin absorbing. Every sight, sound, word, and sensation is recorded. The mind is not something we are born with fully formed. It is something that takes shape over time, like a sponge soaking up impressions. These impressions come from the family we are born into, the society we grow up in, the language we speak, the television we watch, the books we read, and the experiences we go through. Over time, these collected fragments become what we call our mind. But it's simply an accumulation, not a creation. It's a reflection of the world, not an individual invention. When you look closely, you will see that every thought in your head has some root in the outside world. You didn't invent the language you think in. You didn't invent the belief systems you carry. You didn't decide your fears. They were planted by experiences or by what others said to you. Even your desires are not truly yours. They have been shaped by advertisements, media, peer pressure, and unmet needs. In this sense, the mind is more like a public property that has been painted with personal colors. But those colors, too, are borrowed. The moment you realize that your mind is not really yours, something powerful starts to shift. Instead of blindly following every thought or emotion, you begin to question, where did this come from? Is this me or just something I picked up? This simple inquiry can shake the very foundation of your identity. For most people, the mind is a master, dictating their moods, reactions, and choices. But when you see it as a non-personal entity, like a cloud passing through the sky, it loses its grip over you. This is not a denial of the mind's importance. The mind is a phenomenal mechanism, incredibly complex, capable of memory, analysis, imagination, and innovation. But it is not you. It is a part of your experience, not the core of your being. Just like you use your phone for communication, you use your mind for processing life. But imagine confusing your phone with yourself. How absurd that would be. Yet this is what most people do with their mind every single day. If the mind were truly yours, you would be able to switch it off at will. You would be able to choose only joyful, peaceful, and empowering thoughts. But that's not how it works. Thoughts come uninvited. Emotions rise unexpectedly. Memories surface without permission. This proves that the mind functions on its own, not with your conscious control, but through momentum gathered over time. The mind is like a machine that never stops, but you have mistaken its noise for your own voice. Recognizing that this mind is not truly personal is the first step toward freedom. The mind is a magnificent instrument, capable of reasoning, creating, solving, and imagining. It is one of the most sophisticated tools ever known, but like any tool, its value depends on how it is used. A sharp knife can prepare a beautiful meal or cause injury, depending on whose hand it is in. Same is true for the mind. When you use it consciously, it becomes a powerful ally. But when it operates on its own, without guidance or awareness, it can become a source of deep confusion and suffering. Most people live as if the mind is the master and they are its servant. The mind thinks a fearful thought and they tremble. It remembers a painful event and they suffer again. It imagines a future problem and they worry as if it's real. This happens because the mind is running without discipline, without intention, much like a wild horse pulling a cart in every direction. And if you are seated in that cart without holding the reins, your journey will be chaotic. You don't choose where you go, the mind decides, and you simply follow. This is not how it was meant to be. The mind was given to you as a support system, a means of navigation, not as your identity. Just as you have hands to grasp and legs to walk, you have a mind to process information and create meaning. But the mistake began when you forgot that you are not the mind. You are the awareness that uses the mind, not the mind itself. Without this understanding, the tool takes over the master's role, and the direction of your life is no longer yours to choose. The tragedy is that people praise the intellect without understanding its limitations. Mind can only function based on what it has gathered, past knowledge, memory data. It cannot perceive the vastness of existence beyond that. It cannot touch love, joy, or inner peace directly. It can only talk about them. So when the mind becomes your master, your life becomes restricted to the known, the calculable, the predictable. But true life, aliveness, lies beyond calculation. It lies in stillness, in intuition, in presence, qualities that the mind cannot grasp, only the being can. When you reclaim your place as the master, the mind settles into its natural position as a servant. You don't destroy it, you guide it. You use it when needed and set it aside when it's not. You allow thoughts to pass like tools laid out on a table, choosing the right one for the right task. In this way, the mind enhances your experience of life rather than distorting it. It becomes a doorway to expression and creativity, not a prison of compulsive thinking. It serves you instead of ruling over you. The human mind operates much like a memory bank, an immense storage device that records everything it encounters. Every word you've heard, every image you've seen, every emotion you felt, and every experience you've lived is registered in some form. Some of these impressions are conscious, many are subconscious, but all of them become part of the mental software you run your life with. Just as your body is built from the food you eat, your mind is built from the impressions you collect. And just like stored files on a computer, these impressions can be accessed, replayed, or even trigger automatic responses without your awareness. From early childhood, the mind begins to store inputs, the way your parents spoke to you, the cultural values taught to you, the punishments, the praises, the laughter, and the trauma. These experiences are not left behind. They form subtle layers of memory that silently shape your personality, behavior, and perception. When you react angrily in a certain situation, it may seem like a fresh emotion, but it's often just a replay of something that was stored in your memory long ago. This is the cycle of psychological conditioning. The mind stores, recalls, and repeats. Because the mind is built on memory, it struggles to remain in the present moment. It constantly projects the past into the future. For example, if someone once betrayed your trust, the mind stores that memory and projects it onto every new relationship, even when there's no sign of betrayal. This is how past memory distorts present reality. The mind's reliance on stored impressions becomes a trap. You don't experience what is, you experience what your memory interprets. This is why people often feel stuck in repetitive emotional patterns. It's not life repeating itself, it's memory replaying its loop. What makes this more complex is that the mind does not store experiences as neutral data. It attaches emotion, judgment, and identity to them. So the memory of being insulted is not just a fact stored. It is recorded along with pain, fear, and resentment. Every time a similar situation arises, the mind reactivates that emotion along with the memory, creating a strong emotional reaction that may feel uncontrollable. In this way, your present behavior becomes governed by outdated emotional recordings. The mind, meant to be a useful storehouse, ends up becoming a prison of past impressions. The true challenge, then, is not to erase the mind's memory, that's neither possible nor necessary, but to recognize that these stored memories are not the ultimate truth of who you are. Just because the mind holds a record of something doesn't mean it must dictate your identity or your destiny. By understanding the mind as a memory bank, you begin to disidentify from it. You can say, this memory is present in me, but I am not this memory. That recognition alone opens a door to immense inner freedom. Suffering does not arise simply because thoughts or emotions exist. It arises because we identify with them. Identification is the moment when you say, this is me or this is mine. The problem is not in having a mind, but in believing that the content of the mind is your identity. When anger arises, you don't just say, there is anger. You say, I am angry. When fear appears, you don't observe it like a passing cloud. You embody it as if it is the truth of who you are. This identification is like glue. It binds you to the temporary and makes you suffer it as if it's permanent. The mind as a tool is neutral. It can imagine heaven or hell. It can create art or anxiety. But when you begin to cling to what it produces, oh my thought, oh my pain, oh my story, you become entangled. You no longer use the mind. The mind uses you. If a painful thought arises and you see it as a passing wave, it has no power. But the moment you claim it as your own, it burrows into your emotional body and becomes suffering. The pain isn't in the thought itself, it's in your involvement with it. That involvement is identification. This identification begins very early in life. As a child, you were told, you are this, or you shouldn't do that, you must believe this. Bit by bit, the mind gathers labels. Name, nationality, religion, education, profession, and you start believing these are you. Over time, your sense of self becomes tightly wrapped around as mental concepts. When someone questions your beliefs, you feel personally attacked, not because your being is under threat, but because your idea of who you are is under threat. And this idea is nothing but a mental projection built through identification. This identification isn't limited to thoughts and roles. It extends to emotions, past experiences, and even pain. People carry wounds for decades, not because the event is still happening, but because they have made it part of their identity. This happened to me, I was betrayed, I failed. The experience becomes a badge, and unconsciously, they protected it. If asked to let go, they resist, because who would they be without that story? The ego finds stability in suffering when it is tied to identity. And the deeper the identification, the deeper the suffering. Freedom does not come from controlling the mind or suppressing emotions. It comes from disidentifying, from learning to say, this thought is here, but it is not me. This emotion is strong, but it is passing through, not mine to hold. With this shift in perception, suffering begins to lose its grip. You do not become cold or indifferent, you become clear. And in that clarity, you find space between you and your mental content. That space is where peace lives, not because the world changes, but because you are no longer entangled with every wave the mind throws at you. Many people misunderstand silence. They think silence means the absence of sound or a kind of emptiness, a void. But true silence is not a lack, it is a presence. It is not about being empty, but about being full in a way the mind cannot grasp. When the mind quiets down, what remains is not a blank space, but a profound sense of aliveness. In that silence, you do not disappear. In fact, for the first time, you begin to truly exist. There is no noise of thought to define you, no story to bind you, just the vibrant presence of being. This silence is not something you create, it is what remains when the clutter of the mind dissolves. It is always there, beneath the surface noise. You don't need to manufacture it, you only need to notice it. When you sit still, when you stop feeding every thought, when you stop chasing every emotion, silence naturally emerges. It's like the sun revealing itself once the clouds move aside. In that silence, there is no effort, no tension, only a deep and effortless awareness. And this awareness is not dull, it is rich, alert, and intensely alive. When you enter this silence, a different kind of intelligence awakens. Not the intellect that calculates and compares, but a knowing that is direct and wordless. You may not be able to explain it logically, but you can feel it. A clarity that doesn't come from thinking, but from simply being. In this space, decisions become clear without analysis, peace arises without reason, and love flows without attachment. The mind, which always seeks answers, becomes quiet in the presence of something far greater than itself. People often chase outer experiences to feel alive, thrills, success, entertainment, relationships. But none of these can match the fullness that silence brings. It is not dependent on what is happening around you. In fact, even in the middle of chaos, if you are rooted in this inner silence, you remain untouched. You see the noise, but it does not disturb you. You hear the world, but you are anchored within. That inner silence becomes your center, your home, your sanctuary, not because it is empty, but because it holds everything without clinging to anything. The deeper you enter silence, the more you realize that it is not just an inner state. It is the source of all creativity, all wisdom, and all joy. Everything meaningful arises from silence. A beautiful song, a profound insight, a heartfelt connection. Silence is not the absence of life. It is the space in which life blossoms most authentically. It is where truth begins to speak, not in words, but in presence. When the mind stops filling every space with its noise, silence reveals a reality far more expansive, far more nourishing than anything thought could ever construct. Awareness is not something you need to develop. It is already present, but in most people, it is clouded by constant mental noise. You are aware when you look at a flower, when you feel the wind on your face, when you hear a child laugh. But this awareness is usually short-lived because the mind quickly intrudes. The moment a thought takes over, you're no longer fully present. You're lost in commentary, in judgment, in memory or imagination. The journey of freedom begins when you start to extend that awareness beyond fleeting moments and bring it into the observation of your own mind. When you become aware of your thoughts instead of being absorbed by them, a subtle but powerful shift takes place. For most people, the thought arises and they become the thought. But with awareness, the thought arises and you watch it. This simple act of observation creates distance. It's the difference between being caught in a storm and watching it from a safe shelter. The storm still rages, but it no longer throws you around. This witnessing is not detachment in a cold, uncaring way. It is presence without entanglement. You are there, fully conscious but not drowning in the mental drama. The beauty of awareness is that it doesn't require you to fix or change anything. It doesn't ask you to silence the mind forcefully. It simply asks you to see. And in that seeing, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to lose its compulsive grip. Just as shadows vanish in light, unconscious mental patterns begin to dissolve in the presence of awareness. The more you watch without judgment, just noticing, the less power your thoughts and emotions have over you. They come and go, but you remain undisturbed. Most suffering is sustained by unconscious participation. You fuel anger by reacting to it. You feed anxiety by resisting it. You deepen sadness by indulging in the story behind it. But awareness interrupts this pattern. It doesn't deny the emotion. It brings light to it. And once it is seen clearly, the energy behind it begins to release. This doesn't mean you become numb. On the contrary, awareness makes you more alive. But instead of being at the mercy of every passing thought, you become rooted in a deeper intelligence. Freedom is not the absence of thoughts, it is the presence of awareness. When you live with awareness, the same mind that once enslaved you becomes a servant. It still functions, still thinks, still remembers, but you are no longer caught in its web. You can choose what to engage with and what to let pass. You can listen to your thoughts without believing every word. You can feel emotions without being owned by them. In that space of awareness, you begin to taste a freedom that is not dependent on outer circumstances, a freedom that is entirely internal, yet deeply transformative.